Never go to the second location. Always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne, and you are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. Here on Residue, we tell you the truth behind your favorite true crime movies, and we are talking about I Know My First Name is Steven. Now, if you listened to last week's episode, part 1, we covered everything about Steven Stayner and his abduction by Kenneth Parnell. But today, on part 2, we're going to be talking about Steven Stayner's older brother, Cary Stayner, who became known as the Yosemite Park Killer. And hello, Resi Crew, and hello to all of the new Resi Crew followers who have joined in the past couple of weeks. We are so happy to have you here with us. And you know that on Residue, I always say the greatest thing you can possibly do for any podcast that you love is leave a positive review, because these reviews are what help us build our audience. And they also let us know that you're kind of digging what we're putting down. So today I wanted to read you a new review that we just received, and I have to talk about this one because we got to mention Rocky. So this is titled Officially Hooked on This Podcast, 5 stars from Michelle and Rocky. Hello, guys. I don't usually stick with podcasts, but Residue completely changed that for me. I found Chrissy on TikTok and immediately loved her style, so I checked out the podcast, and I ended up binging the whole thing in less than a month. Now I listen every week when I walk my dog, Rocky, and it's something I genuinely look forward to. Her calming voice, the way she tells each story, and the care she puts into every case really stand out. You can tell she puts her heart into what she does, and it makes the podcast feel really special. I'm a big fan. You are the best. Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone that has been sending me DMs and reviews and just great comments on social media. And as you know, you can follow me on Instagram at Residue Podcast, TikTok, Residue a True Crime Podcast, and Facebook, Residue a True Crime Podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And before we begin, as you know, listener discretion is always advised. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is a part 2 episode. If you have not listened to part 1, just step on back over there and then come meet us back here after. So usually in the beginning of every episode, I'll discuss the movie that we are talking about, but we went over all of that in part 1. So instead, I'm going to talk about the documentary that you can watch on Hulu that is also about the Steven Stayner case and the Cary Stayner case. So that is called Captive Audience, A Real American Horror Story. So this doc was released as a 3-part series released on Hulu in April 2022, and it explores the 1972 kidnapping of Steven Stayner and also his brother Cary Stayner. It explores how the media coverage shaped public perception of the case and the family's legacy. So this movie featured Ashley Stayner, who was one of its key interview subjects, and that is Steven Stayner's daughter, Kay Stayner, Steven's mother, Todd Eric Andrews, who played Cary Stayner in the made-for-television movie, and it also features Corin Nemec, who played Steven Stayner in I Know My First Name is Steven. And I just have to say something really quickly, because I had a huge fangirl, teenage girl dream come true moment this week after the part 1 episode was released, and I put a video up on Instagram about the case. Corin Nemec followed me on Instagram, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to brag about that for a moment. Because if 15-year-old me could see that now, she'd be in her bedroom, jumping on her bed, screaming and kissing all of her Teen Beat posters on her wall. I just had to share that with you guys, with the Resi Crew, because I know you guys are feeling exactly what I am putting down here. Now, since Steven Stayner has passed away, and we talked about that in part 1, and then Cary Stayner, you will see what happens to Cary Stayner in this episode, wasn't able to participate in this docuseries. They brought in Corin Nemec and Todd Eric Andrews, and these two actually read statements from Steven and Cary, and they're sort of making their roles come back to life in this documentary. It's a very interesting way to film. Now, before we begin talking about Cary, I wanted to wrap up some of the loose ends from part 1 because we did discuss that Kenneth Parnell was sentenced to 7 years for the kidnapping of both Steven Stayner and Timmy White. He was never tried for any of his sexual abuse on children. And this is a horrific case because in 1951, Kenneth Parnell was arrested and convicted for the same thing, for kidnapping, raping a child. And they did not keep him in prison. They let him go. And then he's caught again for doing this to Timmy White and Steven Stayner. And they gave him less time than Steven had to live with this man. This man kidnapped Steven and he held him captive for 7.5 years. He gets less of a prison sentence. He serves less than 7.5 years in prison and he's set free. And as you know, when Kenneth Parnell kidnapped Steven Stayner back in 1972, he had an accomplice, and his name was Irvin Edward Murphy. So Irvin Edward Murphy, he went by Murph, he was actually sentenced to 5 years in prison, and he was paroled after 2 years. And then when Kenneth abducted 5-year-old Timmy White, he had the help of a teenager named Sean Porman. And Sean Porman was sentenced to a term in a juvenile work camp. And all of these really disgusting men, they're set free. They're living their lives. And then around 2003, guess what? Kenneth Parnell, he's arrested again. Oh my God, I want you guys to guess what he's arrested for. He's arrested for trying to buy a 4-year-old for $500. At the time of his arrest, he was in very poor health, and he had a caregiver, and this caregiver had a sister. Her name was Diane Stevens. Now, Diane Stevens knew all about Parnell. So, thankfully, she goes straight to the police and lets them know what Parnell is trying to do, and they set up a sting operation. So, this resulted in Parnell actually, finally, being sentenced to life. Well, he's sentenced to 25 years to life, and that was only because of California's 3 strikes law. Now, when the prosecution was up to argue their case, they showed a slideshow of Steven Stayner, and he was marked number 1. Timmy White was marked number 2, and then there was a blank screen marked number 3, and that was to show this non-existent child that Parnell was trying to abduct. And so this is when he is finally sentenced and put into a prison setting at 25 years to life. It took 3 times for that to happen. And you know what? It took 4 times because of the child that he was caught abusing in 1951. Who knows how many more children that he abused that we might not ever know about. But thankfully, Kenneth Parnell died in January of 2008. He was 76 years old. He died of natural causes, and I am done talking about that piece of shit human being. This entire case is so many layers to talk about and so much sadness. One of the saddest parts of this entire story is the fact that Steven Stayner rescues Timmy White, carries him home. Now, I had somebody write this on one of my comments on TikTok. I had a whole story up about Steven Stayner and Timmy White, and they said the most depressing part of this story to them is the part where Steven carries Timmy White home, and then when Steven Stayner passes away, he dies tragically in a hit-and-run motorcycle accident. Timmy White is a pallbearer at Steven's funeral. And now he's carrying Steven to his final resting place. And when my commenter, my follower on TikTok put it into those words, it is just so incredibly heartbreaking. And what's even more heartbreaking is that Timmy White died on April 1st, 2010, at the age of 35 from a pulmonary embolism. It's like when you hear every piece of this story, every time you hear something new, you're thinking, oh my God, it cannot get worse. This cannot get any worse. This cannot be real life, but it keeps getting worse. Honestly, I could do an entire podcast just about Steven Stayner, Cary Stayner, the entire Stayner family. Maybe I'll do that one day. Maybe I'll have just an entire podcast that only focuses on this story because it blows my mind So for this episode, my main sources were the docuseries from Hulu, Captive Audience, a real American horror story, and also there is a really fantastic 2020 episode titled Evil in Eden. And when we last left you in part 1, I told you that Cary Stayner told everyone, listen, if you think that my brother's life is so interesting, well then just wait until you hear about mine. Because right now in part 2, this is the story of Cary Stayner. Cary Stayner, the older brother of Steven Stayner, is remembered by friends and family as calm, serene, creative. He was always at his desk just drawing. He loved art, and he only liked to do things his way. Art gave Cary the opportunity to be alone without being questioned. He never drank alcohol. He liked to be alone. He was uncomfortable in social situations, especially with girls. And his sister Corey believed that Cary was always unwell, that he fell through the cracks in some ways. And she says that her brother Cary was off. Cary did grow up with trichotillomania, and this is a disease where you cannot stop pulling at your hair. You cannot stop pulling your hair out. Cary also ended up having a nervous breakdown, but he tried to seek help, and he never got any. And this is a common theme we see in the Stayner family. I mean, we're talking in part 1 about how Steven never really got the therapy he needed to talk through his problems. But we have to remember it was the 70s, the 80s. People didn't talk about their problems. Cary was his happiest when he was just alone by himself in the woods. And if you remember, the family lived by Yosemite National Park. So Cary loved just to be out there in the woods alone. He loved to smoke some weed. He loved to get naked and run around the woods. That sounds creepy as shit to me. But there were actually some people in the 2020 episode that talk about how Cary just seemed like this cool dude that loved nature. And that's the thing about Cary, is that people often referred to him as handsome. There are even some detectives you'll hear later in this story that refer to him as this really tall, handsome guy with movie star white teeth. To many, he just came across as this shy, quiet, handsome guy. He had a lot of friends, but after high school, he started spinning out of control. His life started spinning out of control, and this is when he takes refuge into Yosemite. He disappeared into the woods at this point. Cary was hiding a lot of demons, and he seemed quiet and shy, but he was really a mess on the inside. He felt incredible neglect and abandonment from his father. He felt like his father favored Steven. He felt like the entire country favored Steven. And you'll remember there's a very infamous photo of Steven returning home, and Steven is having his picture taken by the paparazzi. There's police officers escorting him through the crowd, and very eerily in the background you see Cary just staring off, staring almost past the camera. Cary would later admit that he has a very clear recollection. By the age of 7, he's sitting in a car with his parents. He's in the back seat, and they're driving past a grocery store, and he can see the cashiers inside of the grocery store behind the glass, and he had awful thoughts about them, awful thoughts about torturing them, strangling them, raping them. He talks about going through the grocery store line with his parent as a 7-year-old, looking up at the cashier and just fantasizing about destroying her. By the fall of 1997, Cary lands a job as a handyman at the Cedar Lodge in Yosemite Park. At this point, he's in his 30s, and this lodge is about 7 miles outside the gate of Yosemite, and it's surrounded by wooden bear sculptures. He is working here, and he is in love with this job because it gives him access to his beloved woods, where he absolutely loves to be. Now, for the most part, most people that worked here alongside Cary, they liked him. They thought he was a cool guy, but there was this one woman named Trish Houts, and Trish ran the restaurant in the Cedar Lodge, and she also had a teenage daughter. And Cary would hang around that teenage daughter way too much for Trish's liking, and this woman had her sensors up. Like, she knew that this was not the greatest guy for her daughter to be around. And she was like, get away from my daughter. Do not come near my daughter. So there were some people at this lodge who thought something was up with Cary. By February of 1999, Cary had been working at the lodge for about 2 years. And now at this point in the winters, it was pretty desolate. That weekend, 42-year-old Carole Sund and her 15-year-old daughter, Juli, they were excited to show Juli's teenage friend, Silvina Pelosso, Yosemite National Park, because Silvina was an exchange student from Argentina, and she was staying with the family for 3 months, and she was really excited to just see all of the wonderful things that she could see in America. The trio was staying at the Cedar Lodge, and on the evening of February 15th, Carole had phoned her husband, Jens, from their hotel. The trio spent the day in the park. They were planning on returning the next day, the following morning, to do some more sightseeing. That night, before they returned to their hotel room, they went out to the little restaurant inside of the hotel, the Cedar restaurant. They ordered hamburgers. On the way back to the room, the girls stopped into the lobby and they actually rented Jerry Maguire. So they got back to their room, they got into their PJs, the girls sat down, they started watching their movie, and they hear a knock on the door. Now this knock was Cary Stayner. And Cary Stayner says that he was walking around the building and he noticed there was one car in the parking lot. It was a Pontiac. He saw that car in the parking lot next to the 500 building all by itself. And his exact words were, the window was open, the curtain was open, and I could see inside that there was 3 women and no man. Cary says that he was raging inside. He had this rage inside of him and he wanted to let loose, and he knew that it was time to kill. He knocked on this door and Carole answered. He says, hello, I am the maintenance guy. There is a leak coming from the upstairs room going into your bathroom, and I need to come in and I need to take a look at this leak. And Carole says, absolutely hell no, you are not coming into this room. She tells him that, listen, I have 2 young girls in here, 2 kids in here, and they're in their pajamas and they're watching TV. They're watching Jerry Maguire. I do not want you to come in here. How about this? You come back in the morning. And he says no. And he persists, and he will not leave. He says, listen, if you don't let me come in, I'm just going to kick you all out of this room. I'll go upstairs and tell the front desk that you need to get out and you'll have to be moved to another room. And he's persisting so hard that Carole is like, fine, come in. Look at the leak in the bathroom, please. He walks in. He goes straight into the bathroom. He starts messing with the ceiling fan, pretending that he's looking for some leak. Cary states later to detectives, quote, they let me in and I went to the bathroom to check the fan where I said the leak was coming from. And when I came out of that bathroom, I pulled a gun out and I told them that I wanted money and the keys to the car. Cary took a 15-year-old Juli and 16-year-old Silvina and he put them into the bathroom. He came out, he tied Carole up, and then he strangled her. Then he bundled Carole up, and then he put her into the trunk of her rented Pontiac. He then goes back inside of the hotel room and tells the girls to come out of the bathroom. He takes the girls and sexually assaults both of them. And Silvina is putting up a huge fight. He said that Juli did everything he told her to do. She complied, but Silvina did not want to comply. She was fighting back hard, and he couldn't handle it. So he took her into the bathroom again and strangled her. And then he took her body and placed it into the trunk of the Pontiac with Carole's body. While he did this, he had taken Juli into the room next door, room 510. Juli and her mother and her friend were staying in room 500. So he has Juli in the bathroom of 510. She has no idea what's going on. She's feared for her life. He duct tapes her hands together, and then he wraps her in a pink blanket, and he carries her to the car, the Pontiac, and he puts her in the front seat, and then they just drove. And Cary says, I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't know what I was going to do. Cary drove Juli about 100 miles away to a village called Sierra Village. He took her out of the car and he carried her to this pathway. He carried her the way a man carries a woman after they just got married. And he laid a blanket out on the ground and he slit her throat. And he said that after he killed her, he stood there and looked out at the beautiful sunrise because the sun was coming up. And he said he thought how beautiful this day looked. Cary lit Carole's rented Pontiac on fire with Carole and Silvina's body in the trunk. And then he called a cab. And while he's driving back, you got to remember he's 100 miles away from the Cedar Lodge. While he's driving back with this cab driver to the Cedar Lodge, she's just having some chit chat with him. And she's like, what are you doing all the way up here this early in the morning? And he tells her that he was just hanging out with some friends and, he wanted to go home, but everyone left. So he needed a ride home. And now while this cab driver is driving him home, he is talking to her about Bigfoot because Cary is obsessed with Bigfoot. In fact, Cary believes that he did see Bigfoot. This taxi driver's name is Jenny Paul, and she is interviewed in the 2020 episode. She says that as they approach the Cedar Lodge, that Cary points out this little cabin in the woods. It's pushed far back into the woods, and he points it out to her and says, hey, that's the cabin where I saw Bigfoot. So I go to that cabin often, and I just sit there and I look around because one day when I was at that cabin, Bigfoot ran out of the woods, and he ran around the cabin a couple of times. And when I ran outside to try to catch him and see him, he ran back into the trees. It is February 16th. Later that night, Carole's husband, Jens, is waiting at the San Francisco International Airport for his wife, his daughter, their friend to arrive. They were supposed to arrive to the airport around 10 p.m. Jens is standing there waiting to pick them up, and they don't show up. And he says that at first he really didn't think anything was wrong because he says, and I quote, "We never had anything bad happen to us." There is an immediate missing persons alert that goes out, and days go by with no trace of Carole, Juli, Silvina. 10 days of searching in Yosemite National Park, and this becomes the largest search in Yosemite history. The families are all over the news. They are keeping this in the spotlight. They want their family members found. Carole's parents, Silvina's parents, come all the way from Argentina. Silvina's mother, Carole Pelosso, she starts asking the American people to please help. At this point, police start interviewing every single person that was either at the lodge or worked at the lodge. They even interviewed Cary Stayner. And Cary was as calm as can be. He raised absolutely no red flags to these detectives. They didn't think that he had anything to do with this. And in fact, while they're interrogating Cary, just asking him questions about what he saw, he starts talking about Steven. He starts talking about his brother and the made-for-TV movie, and he's just creating small talk. A month after the trio disappeared, there is a break in the case. The Pontiac is found 60 to 70 miles away from the Cedar Lodge. Now, police knew they were looking for a 1999 Pontiac Grand Prix, but this vehicle was burned beyond recognition. They couldn't even tell what kind of car this was. And they did find 2 bodies in the trunk, but there was absolutely no way to identify these bodies. They were burned beyond recognition. There was evidence found near the car. They found some shoes, a CD player, they found the car keys, and they found a disposable camera. The police get the pictures developed from this camera, and these are pictures of Juli, Silvina, Carole. There's pictures of the girls in their pajamas the night they were murdered, doing handstands in the hotel room. There is a very chilling photo of Carole and Silvina sitting on their hotel room beds, and this photo was taken 20 minutes before Cary Stayner knocked on that hotel room door. Detectives found the bodies of Carole and Silvina, but where is Juli? At this point, the nation still has hope that she's alive. Her family still has hope. That is until the FBI receives a letter. Now, this letter, it was a handwritten map describing where to find Juli's body. But at the top of the letter was written, "We had fun with this one." The FBI, they bring in cadaver dogs and they go to the location of this map and they find Juli's body within 10 seconds. Her body was located about 40 miles away from where they found the burned Pontiac. As you would predict, people are losing their minds. The nation is scared out of their mind. Of course, people don't want to come to Yosemite. Nobody wants to go there, no tourist. But by the summer of 1999, the tourists, they were coming back and things seemed to be getting back to normal. And that is because the FBI believed that, yes, they did have the killers in custody. Killers, 2 of them. They were 2 men. They were half-brothers. Their names were Michael Larwick and Eugene Dykes. And the police believed them to be the murderers of Carole, Juli, and Silvina because these 2 were violent offenders. They had really horrible criminal records, and the FBI assured everyone that they had the right men in custody. So people start coming back to Yosemite. Everything's going great. The summer's kicking off with all of these tourists, and everyone now feels at ease. In the summer of 1999, Joie Armstrong, she was 26 years old. She was a naturalist at Yosemite, and her job was to take children and teach them about the nature of Yosemite. Her mother says that Jody was beautiful, funny, fun. She was smart. She was adventurous. She was exquisite. Now, she did ask her daughter, "Are you afraid to be working in Yosemite with such dangerous things going on?" And Joey said no, because they're safe now. They caught the guys. Everything is safe. The woods are safe. The police later even found one of Joey's journals, and inside she wrote about what was going on with the Yosemite killers, and she wrote, "The monsters are gone." So she felt like everything was fine, and there was no reason for anyone to be worried about her, a 26-year-old woman living alone in the woods, because Joey was living in a cabin. And now this cabin was called Big Meadow, and this was the green cabin. This was a cabin that was leased out every year, and Joey was living there by herself at this point. This is the same exact cabin that Cary Stayner was talking to his cab driver about, the cabin where he saw Bigfoot. There is this little back road in Yosemite Park that very little people know about, and this is where Joey was living in the green cabin. This is also where Cary Stayner comes a lot. This is where Cary Stayner spent most of his time. He would come out here and he would look for Bigfoot. Now, Cary is living the high life right now. Cary just got away with 3 murders. There are 2 men in custody, and everybody believes that the woods are safe. It is almost the weekend, and Joey has this trip planned with all of her friends. So she is packing up her car and she's going in and out of her cabin, putting some, suitcases into her car, going back in the cabin, grabbing some more stuff she might need. And Cary Stayner is approaching the cabin and he notices Joey and he sees how beautiful she is, her blonde hair, how petite she is. And he thinks, I guess I have different plans for today. His mood instantly changes and he decides, and these are his words when he spoke to detectives later, that he instantly wanted Joey. So he goes back to his truck and he grabs his backpack. And this was his backpack that he brought everywhere with him. It was equipped with a gun, duct tape, a knife. He walks up to Joey and he starts talking to her, making small talk, probably talking about Bigfoot. But at the same time, he's looking inside of her cabin just to make sure that there's no man around, just like he did with Carole. Joey is entertaining this conversation, but in the way that we've all done, where we're kind of like, okay, thank you for talking to me, but I've really got to go. So Joey turns around to head back into her cabin, and this is when Cary pulls out his gun, puts it up to her head, and he instructs her to go back into the cabin, and he takes her into the rear bedroom, the room that's farthest away from the door, and he ties her up with duct tape. And let me tell you that Joey fights back so hard. The FBI agents say that her mother should be proud of how hard she fought back. This is the same situation now that Cary had with Silvina. He didn't know what to do because he didn't expect Joie to fight back the way that she did. He ties her up with duct tape and she's still fighting. Cary has tied her up with duct tape. He walks her out to his vehicle. He puts her inside of that vehicle and he drives away with Joie tied up in his car. But Joie is not having it. She's in the back. He has an international scout and she's in the back and he is driving, but she's still trying to get out of these restraints. And she fights so hard that she actually throws herself out of a window of the vehicle and lands on the ground. And when she lands in the road, while the car was still moving, she gets up and she starts running. Cary would later describe Joie as, quote, going crazy in the truck. She fell out of the truck. She tries to run. Cary stops the car. He jumps out and he starts chasing her. And he catches her. And then he says that he took his knife out of his back pocket and slit her throat. Now, if you remember, Joie was supposed to meet her friends that weekend and she didn't show up. So they contact police immediately and the search is on for Joie. Detectives arrive at the cabin that Joie was renting and they find debris on the floor. They find broken sunglasses. They find a red mechanic's rag. And a few feet down from the cabin in a stream, a detective sees something bobbing in the water. They go towards this object and it is Joie. And as they get closer, they realize that Joie has been decapitated. Her head has been removed. They don't think this has anything to do with what happened to Carole and Juli and Silvina. The detectives don't think that this is related at all because they believe they have the suspects in prison. The news of Joie's murder is everywhere. People are calling in tips. And the first clue, the first tip that these detectives get is we saw a powder blue car, a powder blue International Scout around the scene at the time that Joie went missing. And now witnesses say that they always see this car in the area because this is Cary Stayner's car. They immediately issue a BOLO, a be on the lookout, because they want to talk to Cary Stayner. Now, Cary Stayner already fled Yosemite. He fled Cedar Lodge because he was like, oh my God, I left such an easy trail for detectives to find me. So he's freaking out in his mind, but he doesn't realize that detectives, the FBI, they don't think this is a case that is associated with what already happened at the Cedar Lodge. They just want to talk to him because they believe at this point that if his car was around this area, then maybe he saw something. So they're searching everywhere for Cary Stayner and they cannot find him. That is until a tip comes in. Now, this woman who is staying at a nudist colony, a nudist resort, she calls police and says that she saw Cary Stayner because she goes back to her hotel room at this nudist resort and she sees this news report. Be on the lookout for this guy who drives this powder blue vehicle. And she tells police that she's been staying at this nudist colony called Laguna del Sol. It's a resort. They have camping. They have a bar, a restaurant, a shuffleboard contest, volleyball. But everyone's doing this in the nude. So police are like, wait, what? We have to go to a nudist colony because Cary Stayner is there? But they drive to the nudist colony and this woman tells them, okay, listen, I was sitting in the bar and this guy came up to me and he was talking to me and he was hitting on me and he wanted to hang out. But I found it very odd because we're all naked. Everyone in this bar is completely nude, but this man is fully dressed. So when police arrive at the nudist colony, they go straight to the bar and they say that the minute they walked in, they knew exactly where Cary was sitting because he was the only man wearing all of his clothing. So it's two detectives. They walk into the bar. The minute they walk in, Cary Stayner stands up and puts his hands up. And he says, okay, I know what you're here for. He doesn't resist at all. He goes willingly with these detectives, but they both drove separate vehicles. So Cary gets into the vehicle with one detective. This detective's name was Special Agent Jeff Reinick. And Jeff had no idea that he had a killer in the vehicle with him. He puts Cary in the front seat. Cary's sitting in the front seat with him. And these two drive alone. The second detective drives behind them. And this whole entire time, they just have a conversation. He said that Cary was sweet. He was kind. He was extremely handsome. Like I said in the beginning, he noted his movie star good looks. He didn't put up a fight when they got him in the front seat, and off they go. They start driving down the road. And during their conversation, Detective Reineck turns to Cary and he's like, hey, wait a minute, Stayner, are you related to Steven Stayner? And Cary's like, yes, that's my brother. And then Cary starts describing his entire life to Detective Reineck, like they were best friends forever. And he's just letting everything out. He tells him, my brother was held captive for 7 years and his abductor only got 7 years. How unfair is that? How is that fair? Detective Reineck says that Cary was raging. He was angry. And he felt like Cary was really bonding with him. At one point during the conversation, Detective Reineck says, hey, have you ever seen this movie, Billy Jack? There's a movie called Billy Jack. And Cary says no. But then they start talking about the song from Billy Jack. It's called One Tin Soldier. These two start bonding over the song, and Reineck starts telling Cary that he looks like Billy Jack. He's like, you look exactly like the character Billy Jack. And Cary goes, no, I know the song from the movie, but I don't know the movie. I've never seen it. Now they arrive at their destination. They are at the police station, and Detective Reineck, he opens the car door for Cary. They get out, they start walking in, and Cary stops. And he looks Reineck straight into his face, and he says, I'm going to take this right foot, and I'm going to whop you on the side of your face, and there ain't nothing you could do about it. And Detective Reineck is taken aback because this is a very famous line from the movie Billy Jack. So he knows right then and there, what the hell has this guy been lying to me for this entire line? I mean, this is, I've never seen this movie, Billy Jack, but from what I gather, this line from this movie is very popular. It would be like, if I told you, I never saw Dirty Dancing. I don't even know what Dirty Dancing is. I don't know who Patrick Swayze is. And then I look you in your face and go, nobody puts baby in the corner. Now, this whole thing is very important because now the detectives know this guy's a liar. And they brought him in for questioning because they wanted to know if he saw anything go down at the cabin. You have to remember, they still don't know that he is a suspect in this killing. They have no idea. So they're sitting there in the interrogation room with Cary and they order pizza, which apparently this is not something that they usually do. But for some reason, these two have been getting along so well, Cary and the detectives, that they order pizza. And while they're eating, just hanging out, Cary looks at them and says, this is going to be my last meal as a free man. Cary tells these two detectives that he's ready to offer a confession. He says to them, I will give you a confession, but I'm going to need you to give me something in return. He requests CSAM. He requests child sexual abuse material. And these detectives are like, hell no, we are not giving him this. But they play the game with him a little bit. They're like, okay, but why don't you start talking first? Why don't you give us some information on some of these murders, and then we'll give you what you want. Cary starts to talk, and I will tell you right now, they never give him the CSAM. Never. And he starts offering up all of this information about all 4 murders. He is emotionless. He gives them details about all 4 victims. He says that Juli was really calm and cooperative, and she did everything that he told her to do. The detectives say that it almost seemed like he wanted the detectives to feel like she wanted this. That since she was so cooperative, it must mean that none of this was really bad, and she really wanted him to be doing this to her, which is just insane. He says that when he did put Juli into the car, he really had no plan. He had no idea where he was going. He also says, and this is going to send so many chills up and down your body, I want you to prepare for this one, but that February night that he killed Carole, Juli, and Silvina, he walked past their window. He saw their car was the only car in the parking lot, but they were not his intended victims on that night. They were not his first choice, because at this point in time, Cary Stayner had a girlfriend, and this girlfriend had 2 young daughters. These were his first intended victims, and he wanted to kill them on Valentine's Day. One of the daughters of his girlfriend is interviewed on the 2020 episode, and she talks about how she loved Cary. She genuinely loved him and believed that he was a great person. She was just a little girl, and her mom had this really handsome, sweet boyfriend who would come to their house all of the time. She said every single time he ever walked in their door, he bought her a new Beanie Baby. He taught her how to swim. He taught her how to dive. She genuinely really trusted this man. And this man wanted to kill her mother, her, and her sister. He told detectives that his plan was to rape them all and then murder them. And he went to their house that night, believing this was it. He's going to kill these 3, this family, this mother and her daughters. But somebody else showed up at the house that day because his girlfriend also worked at Cedar Lodge. She worked at the restaurant. So somebody else that worked on the grounds of the Cedar Lodge showed up to her house, and he says all of his plans just went to hell. So he left her house that night in a rage, angry as hell that he couldn't carry out his plan. And he got back to the Cedar Lodge, and that night is when he noticed Carole, Juli, and Silvina. The daughter of Cary's girlfriend, interviewed as an adult on 2020, talks about how she understands that she is a survivor, but this ruined her childhood. It tore apart her family. And she said that when something like this happens to you, it doesn't even feel like it actually happened to you. She said she felt like she was watching a movie. Cary just opened up to these detectives. They asked him, will you bring us to the places where you took these women? Then Cary does agree. He goes to these places. There's one particular spot where he shows them where he threw his duct tape, a knife, and a watch. And so now they have evidence. They have Cary's confession. They have all of this evidence. Cary is arrested and tried for the murders, and he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. His lawyers claimed that he had a family history of sexual abuse, mental illness, and this all manifested itself not only in these murders, but also in his obsessive-compulsive disorder, and that included his request to see child sexual abuse material. No matter how his lawyers tried to play it, Cary Stayner was found sane, and Cary Stayner was sentenced to death. To this day, Cary Stayner remains incarcerated at San Quentin. Now, Cary was always in the background, just like the photo taken of Steven with creepy Cary just staring in the background. He's always in the background. He just wanted to be noticed. He wanted the world to know his story on his terms. Cary said that he knew he needed to be stopped. He said that if he wasn't caught, he would have either killed himself or he would have just kept killing. I don't think Cary would have killed himself. Well, Cary wrote a letter of apology specifically to 15-year-old Juli Sund. And in that letter, he said he was remorseful about what he had done. He wrote, "I'm just sorry that you were there when the years of fantasizing my darkest dreams became a reality in the flesh." Cary Stayner stated that he wanted a movie of the week made about his story. He wanted to be just like his brother Steven. He wanted all of the attention that Steven got from this made-for-TV movie. Cary stated, "If anyone knows the tainted picture of reality that a made-for-TV movie paints, it is me. After my brother's movie aired, I was disgusted, and I wished it had never been made." Stay safe and stay paranoid. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Do not forget to hit that follow button so you can meet us back here again next Tuesday. Residue is created, hosted, written, researched, edited, and produced by me, Chrissy Champagne. I am so happy you guys were here with me today, and I cannot wait to see you guys again. See you soon.